Hi, all. My name is Emily, and I am a former elementary teacher. I want to share some of the reasons why I left the classroom. I think any teacher leaving education should be sharing their reasons why, because we have a problem in this country. We are losing teachers, and it's not okay. These are trained professionals that can no longer sustainably work in their career that I won't speak for them, but I absolutely loved. I only ever thought about being a teacher. I never considered other possibilities once I became an education major. Um, it was all I wanted. And the fact that I don't get to do that anymore gives me a lot of emotions. There's sadness, there's guilt, there's anger that it can't be different. There's confusion and also empowerment because I realized I couldn't stay. And here are some of my reasons. I said goodbye to my students on December 15th. They knew I had been leaving as soon as I decided. I had told them, and I was pretty honest with my second graders, that it wasn't working. I couldn't be the teacher that I knew I was capable of and the teacher that they deserved. Um, so my first big reason is I'm a new mom. He's now an 8-month old. And one, I never thought I'd have kids. I was pretty adamantly against the idea of me ever becoming a mother. I was perfectly satisfied with my students being my kids, just having a couple dozen students every single year and just claiming them as my own for that short time that we're together. Um, but life doesn't always happen that way. And I had my son Owen on April 20th, so at the end of last school year. Um, and everything kind of just changed. I didn't expect for anything to ever come above teaching because that it was what my passion was. It was what my desire was. And um, my family have changed things. In coming back to school in August, Owen was 4 months old, and it's hard. It's really hard to not just be a teacher, to not just be a mom, but to be a working mom, a teacher mom. Uh, I've seen friends do it, and I was like, oh, yeah. I mean, I've lived off of 4 and 5 hours of sleep, but you don't know until you become a mom dealing with sleeplessness. Like, it's a whole other level of tired. And Owen is such a great baby, and I have a lot of support from my significant other, Ben. Uh, we, I mean, we've done really well. We're really lucky. We have, he's a good baby. So even with all of that on my side, a husband who helps out with nighttime, who, um, will be dad without having to ask. Um, it's so exhausting to deal with him at night because he's 8 months. I mean, he was 4 months to 8 months. He was still waking up multiple times. I mean, just last night he was up 2 or 3 times. Um, and he's a baby. That's what they do. But to do that and then give energy there and then have to go to school and give energy to my kids. Um, I wasn't making the best choices. I was frustrated. I was exhausted, and that's hard. It's really hard to try to stay in control of your emotions when you're trying to give too much. And I realized I was giving too much, and getting through the day was really hard in the classroom. And these kids deserve somebody who has more patience. And most times I do. I just, I didn't have the control that I should have. I didn't have the awareness. Well, I might have had the awareness, but I didn't have the power to kind of keep myself in check because of exhaustion of doing too much. Um, it's so much to try and be a mom and be a teacher. Um, there's no time for you. For me, I didn't have time to take care of myself. And uh, that's my next reason for leaving. I would wake up in the morning, get everything ready for Owen, get things ready for myself. Um, Actually, Ben got a lot of things ready for me in the mornings and then go off. I'd have maybe 10 minutes when I used to have like an hour and a half because I was an early bird and I get to school early. So yeah, I'd have 10, 15 minutes to get ready for the school day and then teach all day and then leave, go pick up my son. It'd be about 4 o'clock. So he was up for maybe 3 hours. And so I had 3 hours of real interaction time. And then 7 o'clock came and he was in bed and I was trying to do whatever I needed to. I also, I'm a breastfeeding mom. So I pump during the day and I have to pump at night and I have to pump in the morning. So even those opportunities to interact with my son were hard because I'd have to pump. I had to make sure that I had enough milk for him the next day. Um, and then at school, my plan time was pumping. My lunch time was pumping. It was not a single break. Um, you can only do that for so long before it really takes a toll. Like I didn't have any time to prep during the day and I just wasn't delivering my best self or my best lessons to my students. And they deserve better. But with all that combined, I just went home every day feeling like a failure, feeling like somebody who can't. And it's not a great feeling to go home with every day. And that started right off the bat at the beginning of the year. I got COVID for the first time. My whole family got it right days before school started. And that was awful. Not only having to deal with it for the first time, but also having to worry about my son, who that was his first sickness. And I was stressed. And to miss that last little bit of time to set up my classroom and to get myself organized for the year didn't help. So I felt like I was starting the year behind. And then I just continued. We talk about the honeymoon period in teaching, and mine did not last long. My group needs a lot of support. They needed a lot of support and a lot of practice, and more than what my typical was. So we had to reset and kind of start fresh again 3 weeks in and kind of do everything over. So here I am feeling like I'm behind starting the year and then actually starting all over again just a few weeks in. It didn't feel great. It just kind of, yeah, that feeling of failure was really, really strong and really powerful. And it was every single day. I just couldn't get through. And I had some students that needed a lot more emotional support than I've worked with. Well, in different ways. I've had a lot of students whose behavior needs support. These were just, it was a different class, a different experience. My room got trashed several times from a student who doesn't necessarily know better, um, doesn't have that awareness. But having to deal with that and kids who are in the room when it's getting trashed and destroyed, I mean, it stops everything. Learning doesn't happen, and when there's enough disruption from others who just aren't happy and want to do their own thing, that are still learning to be in a classroom, um, learning stops. You have enough of those disruptions and learning stops. And my afternoons were really difficult because they had hit their limit on sitting and focusing. They hadn't developed, the full day. We're asking 7 and 8-year-olds to sit down for such a long time, from 7:30 to just about 3. And their first year, so I teach in second grade, their first year in school, their kinder year was 2021, 2022. Nope. 2020, 2020, 2021. So as all the schools were trying to figure it out, and we had quarantines all that year, we struggled a whole bunch. As every school, as every district had to try and maneuver the pandemic. And then their first grade year was last year, where we had a little bit more normalcy, but a lot of families are still dealing with the pandemic. A lot of communities still are impacted, and so they're still learning to be people in a school setting. Um, and I don't think curriculum or data or assessments gave them the freedom of that time, them or any other student, freedom or time to be ready for that, to be ready for school. Anyways, so it was just a difficult start, and it just kept getting harder. With the expectation that state test scores count, and even though second grade isn't a state testing grade level, thank goodness, like, God, pressure is on. It's on districts, it's on administration, and then all of that gets put on teachers' shoulders. The stress to make sure that there's growth, growth, growth all the time. It's not a positive environment to try and work in. It kind of just perpetuates that feeling of, whatever you do, teachers, it's not going to be good enough, because the data is not going to be good enough, because the kids aren't growing well enough, and everything you're doing is not enough. And so not only do I feel like a failure every single day, but I feel like even what I am doing isn't going to cut it, isn't going to be enough. Like, it's not okay. My mental health was not okay. And that first year back, 2020, that school year, I had relapsed into my eating disorder because of the stress of teaching and things going on at home. My significant other, he has a heart condition, and I was around children all day, and the idea of getting him sick terrified me. The idea of losing him when we had just bought a house and, really found ourselves in this relationship. So I separated from him. I was in this room, the spare room, for the whole year. And we only would hug if I had 10 days away from kids, which I did a couple times because my class kept getting quarantined for kids coming to school sick, or testing positive from family members and things like that. I mean, there's so much you can't account for when it's a pandemic. And I'm not blaming the kids at all, but it was a hard year. So I realized about Thanksgiving that my eating disorder behaviors had come back really strongly, and I needed help. So I think it was the start of February or March. I started with an intensive outpatient program. It was all online for eating disorder recovery. And so I would teach during the day and then come home, and it was like 3 3-hour meetings a week. an hour with a therapist, and then at least 30 minutes with a nutritionist. So I was spending a lot of time focusing on my recovery, and it was the greatest thing that I think I've ever done for myself. You know, it it kind of saved me in a way and helped me to realize that there was so much more I wanted for my life than to have crappy mental health and to be kind of just in debt to my eating disorder. Um, and I deserve better. And to come to that conclusion, is empowering. So that's when I decided, my husband and I, we decided that we want to have a baby. And my recovery um, helped me kind of realize that I do want to be a mom. And even though I spent that next year, so last school year, pregnant, and I was not a fan of pregnancy. It's not a pleasant experience, but I was teaching and working with a really great group of kids, and I felt like I was doing okay. I was eating, I was making sure that I was healthy and my child was healthy, that I was growing, and it was a wild experience, even though I hated pregnancy like a whole bunch. Um, and then April, I had my son, and I'm coming back, and this is the first time since my relapse and recovery and being pregnant that I've been in the school just me, minus like the breastfeeding and pumping and things. Um, but I wasn't, actively I mean, I'm always actively in recovery, but I wasn't in a program. I wasn't relapse, and I wasn't pregnant, just thinking about keeping my baby healthy. So just me dealing with me during the school day. And I quickly started to struggle. It was really difficult. I never stopped eating, but I didn't have time to care, to put the effort and just the time into what I needed for my mental health to be able to teach. And shortly into the school year, I realized my eating disorder, which I've had since I was a child, well, at least disordered behaviors and body dysmorphia, teaching feeds my eating disorder because it is all about putting other people in front of myself, um, not making time for myself, and it it's very tied to my eating disorder. So my mental health started crashing real fast, and I wasn't relapsing, and I wasn't dealing with disordered behaviors, but I didn't know how to be a teacher in recovery. I don't know how to be a teacher in recovery and stay recovery focused while teaching. And I couldn't figure it out while teaching. I needed space and time to figure out what I needed. Um, so that was huge to be able to put myself first, because no one in those districts, no one in those schools is going to put you first other than you. I mean, that makes sense. That's how it is with any other job as well, but no one else is going to put you first there except for you, and you have to put yourself first. So that was another reason. um our mental health deserves so much more, and if you can't hold on to that, then it's not worth it. It stopped being worth it for me. And I used to be someone who would fight and keep fighting despite my mental health going down the toilet. um but also, another reason is school shootings. I mean, I I thought before April that, if somebody came into my school, into my classroom with the intention to hurt, that I would do anything to protect those kids. I would be dead. It's just kind of something every teacher thinks about and kind of has to come to terms with nowadays is you have to think, will I die for my kids? And for 8 of those teaching years, 9 of those teaching years, yeah, I was I was determined. I knew, my friends and family would be able to move on, they would survive, they would know that I did it because I care for those kids. Um, and then I had Owen and Uvalde happened. Wow. Owen was, barely a month old in my arms. Um, and it affected me in a completely different way. How could I leave him without a mom? No matter how many kids that I'd protect, is it fair? Is it right to do that? And I unfortunately have a situation where in my current placement, I will always wonder if there will be a student who needed more help than anybody in my school could give. I will always wonder if that student will hold me to blame for his expulsion, which ended up happening while he was my student. And I would have always wondered if he would have come looking for me someday. Um, and so I couldn't stay there. I couldn't put my students at risk because of that, and I couldn't put myself at risk because of Owen. He deserves to have a mother, and I'm working my butt off to end years of, you know, mental health illness and generational trauma, and I'm working to break the cycle for him. I can't just leave him because of any any kind of school shooting, any kind of school related um, thing. Like I signed up to be a teacher because I want to live. I don't want to be in an environment where I could lose my life. If I wanted that, maybe I would have joined the military. Maybe I would have become a police officer or some kind of detective. Um, but I didn't want that. I want to be in a position that's safe. I chose a career that was supposed to be safe, and the fact that teachers are not getting protected, we don't deserve that. We're not, we shouldn't have to give our lives. It's not a profession that should do that. Um, and beyond that, we don't get the respect we deserve. I have my master's degree and I love learning. I would go back for my doctorate in teaching, even though I'm not a teacher at this time. And I do hope that my path leads me back to teaching someday. But we do not have the respect that we have earned because we work so hard to be in the environments we're in, to work through the pandemic when everything shut down in March of 2020 and teachers figured it out and people noticed in a positive way. I thought this is the change. This is the change that every teacher has been begging for. Just respect and the fact that it went away so quickly in an even worse than it was before the pandemic. It's not okay. It's not okay. And that goes into I understand that I deserve better. I deserve better. Every teacher does. They should not be on the chopping blocks. We have a shortage, and um, we're not treating teachers well. My replacement, very sweet person, is a student teacher. She is spending her student teaching semester as a full time teacher. She should not have to do that. But that's all we have. That's all the district has, um, because there aren't teachers. And that really sucks. Sucks for kids. So, yeah, I left teaching. I left it, and I really hope that someday I can go back to it. I really hope that the path returns me to the classroom because I loved it. Um, yeah. So thank you for listening. Some next steps for me is I've got a website that's in progress, but it's notyourordinaryteacher.com. I am working on creating some new material for my Teachers Pay Teachers. If you search notyourordinaryteacher.com, I'm working on some blogs and reviewing education books, reviewing just books for fun, picture books, uh, trying to figure out my next step, creating some units for teachers that will hopefully be helpful tools. So yeah, check me out at Not Your Ordinary Teacher, and thank you for getting this far. Bye.